I'm incredibly proud, as are millions of Americans.
No. Not today, Hegseth. Yes or no?
Congressman, you know what a silly question that is.
But silly enough
fidelity
to
the
warrant a
Constitution.
very straightforward answer. Yes or no?
We all support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
You know what?
Proud to serve
I'm not going to
President
waste
Trump.
my time anymore. You're not worthy of my attention or my questions. You're an embarrassment to this country. You're unfit to lead. And there's been bipartisan members of Congress that have called for your resignation. You should just get the hell out and let somebody competently lead this department.
Representative Salud Carbajal of California, a Marine Corps veteran, sat across from Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth in a congressional hearing and told him directly that he is unfit to lead the Department of Defense, that he broke the law, and that he should resign. What followed was one of the most intense exchanges in recent congressional history. Watch what happens.
As a gentleman from California, Mr. Carbajal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It shouldn't come as no surprise that I have serious concerns with both the deployment of the National Guard and the Marines to Los Angeles. I served in the Marine Corps. We are trained to be war fighters, not for crowd control. Everyone here should be alarmed that the President has sent armed forces into a city against the wishes of a governor and mayor. I am concerned this administration is purposely escalating the situation with this step and politicizing our armed forces in the process. Let's call it for what it is. It's political theater. Hegseth, are the Marines in Los Angeles ordered to protect property by any means necessary?
Sir, I would say the ICE officers and police officers being attacked is not political theater. The National Guard and Marines,
just yes or no. Just yes or no.
The National Guard and Marines have the full authority to protect federal ICE agents.
Yes or no?
Federal buildings.
Can you just say yes or no? This isn't Fox anymore. Just yes or no.
They're there to protect federal agents and federal.
Another BS answer. Under the SRUF, the use of force, are Marines allowed to fire warning shots?
No.
Now that's more like it. Isn't that easy? Well, you know, I'm going to beat this drum because you refuse to take responsibility. Will you take responsibility for having made a mistake? Not to mention many people would say break the law in participating in the Signal group chat that included a journalist, your wife, your brother, where classified information was shared.
Sir, every way I communicate is authorized. Every way I communicate.
Okay, if you want to say that. I have called for your resignation. I didn't think you were qualified before your confirmation, and you have done nothing to inspire confidence in your ability to lead competently. You broke the law in sharing classified information, and in doing so, endangered the lives of our service members that you are responsible for. Your inability to hold yourself accountable makes you incapable to lead. This alone makes you unfit to be the Secretary of Defense. Secretary, do you think the United States should continue supporting Ukraine in its fight against Russia, a nation that is hostile towards the United States?
Well, as you know, sir, President Trump is committed to peace.
No, I just want yes or no answers.
Today, the United States has spent billions of dollars.
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Over years.
Just yes or no. Can I get a yes or no out of you?
We continue to send.
Come on.
Presidential drawdown.
It's that easy. Kindergartners can give me a yes or no. Yes or no.
Yes, we support peace in Ukraine.
Come on. Is this really leadership? You're an embarrassment to the United States. If Russia invades NATO allies, are you going to recommend to the president that we fulfill our Article 5 obligations?
Well, Russia has not invaded NATO allies.
No.
President Trump.
No. I reclaim my time. Yes or no? It's that simple.
There's Article 5 in NATO, which we recognize.
So is the answer yes or no?
That's what Article 5 is, yes.
Good. I'm glad you brought yourself to saying yes. Do you think political allegiance to Trump is a requirement for serving our nation, either in uniform or a civilian in the department?
I'm incredibly proud, as are millions of Americans.
No. Not today, Hegseth. Yes or no?
Congressman, you know what a silly question that is.
But silly enough
fidelity
to
to the
warrant a
Constitution.
very straightforward answer. Yes or no?
We all support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
You know
We're
what?
proud to serve
I'm not going to
President
waste
Trump.
my time anymore. You're not worthy of my attention or my questions. You're an embarrassment to this country. You're unfit to lead. And there's been bipartisan members of Congress that have called for your resignation. You should just get the hell out and let somebody competently lead this department.
Mr. Chairman, do we not have any decorum in here?
Thank you very much. I yield my time.
Gentleman yields back. And I would urge everybody to remember and maintain a decorum suitable for this chamber with their further comments.
Let us start from the very beginning of that exchange, because the first thing Representative Carbajal did was not ask a question. He made a statement about who he is. He told the room that he served in the Marine Corps, that Marines are trained to be war fighters, and that using them for crowd control on the streets of Los Angeles is a misuse of the force he once belonged to. That opening was not accidental. Before Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth could say a single word in that hearing room, Representative Carbajal had already established something very important. He was not simply a Democrat criticizing a Republican administration. He was a Marine telling the civilian leader of the United States military that the civilian leader does not understand how that military works or what it is meant to do. That framing made everything that followed much harder for Secretary Hegseth to simply dismiss as partisan politics, because you cannot easily wave away a veteran's criticism of how veterans are being deployed, especially when that veteran is sitting directly across from you in a formal oversight hearing. Representative Carbajal then moved immediately into his central strategy, and that strategy was the yes or no demand. He used it repeatedly, almost relentlessly, throughout the entire exchange. And it is worth understanding why, because it was not simply impatience or aggression for its own sake. When a cabinet official or any witness in a congressional hearing is allowed to give long, open-ended answers, they control the narrative of that hearing. They can introduce favorable context, they can pivot to administration talking points, they can reframe the question entirely, and they can dilute the force of any accusation before it has a chance to land cleanly. The yes or no demand takes all of that away. It forces the witness into a corner where every answer is either a clear confirmation, a clear denial, or a visible and uncomfortable refusal to give either one. Every single time Secretary Hegseth tried to elaborate, Representative Carbajal cut him off. And Secretary Hegseth tried to elaborate almost every single time. That pattern, repeated over and over in front of cameras and colleagues, told a story all by itself. It said that the Secretary of Defense of the United States could not or would not give direct answers to direct questions from an elected member of Congress in a formal oversight setting. That is the story Representative Carbajal wanted the clip to tell, and he executed the strategy to produce exactly that story. Then came the most quoted line of the entire exchange. Representative Carbajal looked at Secretary Hegseth and said, "This is not Fox anymore." That sentence landed hard, and it was designed to. It was a direct and deliberate reference to Secretary Hegseth's professional background before he was confirmed as Defense Secretary. Secretary Hegseth spent years as a television host at Fox News, an environment where he was given sympathetic framing, friendly hosts, supportive audiences, and unlimited space to say whatever he wanted without meaningful pushback or follow-up pressure. Representative Carbajal was telling him plainly that a congressional oversight hearing does not work that way. He was also making a broader point for everyone watching, which is that Secretary Hegseth's preparation for public life was in media performance, not in military command or governmental leadership, and that those two things are not the same and do not produce the same skills. Secretary Hegseth did not have a strong response to that line. He did not refute it, he did not redirect effectively, and the moment passed with the accusation fully visible on the record. The Signal Group chat section of this exchange is where things became most damaging for Secretary Hegseth from a legal and institutional standpoint. Representative Carbajal did not frame it as a procedural complaint or a policy disagreement. He called it a violation of the law. He said Secretary Hegseth shared classified information in a Signal Group chat that included a journalist, Secretary Hegseth's own wife, and Secretary Hegseth's own brother. He said that sharing endangered the lives of American service members, the very people Secretary Hegseth is responsible for protecting and leading. Secretary Hegseth's response was to say that every way he communicates is authorized. That answer is worth examining carefully, because it is constructed very precisely to sound like a denial without actually being one. It does not say the journalist was not in the chat. It does not say classified information was not present in the chat. It does not address how a journalist, a spouse, and a sibling came to be in a group chat where military operational details were being discussed. It simply asserts that his communication methods are authorized, which is a claim about process rather than a response to the substance of the accusation. For anyone who has been following the Signal chat story, that answer produced more questions than it resolved, and it left the most serious parts of the accusation completely untouched on the public record. Representative Carbajal moved on, calling it another answer that avoided accountability, which is exactly how it came across. The Ukraine portion of this exchange is brief, but it carries significant weight when you think about what it reveals. Representative Carbajal asked Secretary Hegseth a direct question about whether the United States should continue supporting Ukraine in its fight against Russia, a country that Representative Carbajal noted is hostile toward the United States. Secretary Hegseth's immediate instinct was to redirect the answer toward President Trump's commitment to achieving peace. That pivot is a very specific kind of deflection. It replaces the direct question about American policy with a statement about the president's intentions, which are not the same thing, and do not answer whether the United States is committed to continuing its support for Ukraine. Representative Carbajal pushed back immediately and kept pushing. He noted the billions of dollars the United States has already sent to Ukraine. He repeated the yes or no demand. He compared the difficulty of getting an answer to asking a kindergartner. Eventually, Secretary Hegseth said yes. But the journey it took to reach that single word is the story. The Secretary of Defense of the United States, in a formal congressional hearing, required sustained and repeated pressure from a single member of Congress to say yes to supporting a democratic nation fighting an authoritarian foreign adversary that has been designated hostile to American interests. That is not a small thing. It reflects how carefully officials in this administration are calibrating every public statement about Ukraine, and how reluctant Secretary Hegseth was to say anything that might be seen as diverging from whatever President Trump's most current position on Ukraine happens to be at any given moment. The Article 5 exchange followed exactly the same structure and produced exactly the same result. Representative Carbajal asked Secretary Hegseth whether he would recommend to President Trump that the United States fulfill its Article 5 obligations under the North Atlantic Treaty Organization if Russia invaded a member ally. Secretary Hegseth's response was to note that Russia has not invaded a North Atlantic Treaty Organization ally. That is a true statement, but it is also completely beside the point, because Representative Carbajal was asking a contingency question about what America would do if that happened, not a factual question about what has already happened. The evasion was visible, and Representative Carbajal named it immediately. He reclaimed his time, repeated the yes or no demand, and reminded Secretary Hegseth that Article 5 is a treaty obligation, not a suggestion. Secretary Hegseth eventually said yes, and Representative Carbajal's response was to say, "Good, I am glad you brought yourself to saying yes." That response was delivered with deliberate condescension, and it was effective precisely because of that. Representative Carbajal was casting himself as the adult in the room, who had just patiently walked the Secretary of Defense of the most powerful military in the world through the basic requirements of a foundational alliance treaty. In a room full of elected officials and staff on both sides of the political aisle, that dynamic carries real weight. The closing statement from Representative Carbajal was the most unfiltered moment of the entire 5 minutes. He told Secretary Hegseth directly that he called for his resignation before his confirmation because he did not believe Secretary Hegseth was qualified for the position. He said Secretary Hegseth has done nothing since his confirmation to inspire confidence in his ability to lead competently. He said Secretary Hegseth broke the law by participating in that Signal group chat where classified information was shared. He said Secretary Hegseth's inability to hold himself accountable makes him incapable of leading an institution that requires accountability at every level. And then he told him to get the hell out and let someone competent lead the Department of Defense. The committee chairman closed the exchange by reminding everyone in the room to maintain the decorum appropriate for that chamber, which was a quiet but clear acknowledgement that the temperature in that room had exceeded what formal oversight hearings are typically meant to look like. Now let us think carefully about the political consequences of what just happened. For Representative Carbajal, this clip delivers almost everything a progressive Democrat in his position could want from a hearing. He entered with credibility that is difficult to dispute, because his military service is real, and his criticism of military misuse is grounded in personal experience. He controlled the structure and the pace of the exchange for the vast majority of his time. He created a public record showing that Secretary Hegseth required extraordinary pressure to give basic affirmative answers on Ukraine and North Atlantic Treaty Organization obligations. And his closing statement gave the Democratic base a moment of visible confrontation that will spread far beyond this hearing room. The legitimate risk for Representative Carbajal is that the tone itself becomes the story for some audiences. Voters who are not already deeply invested in opposing this administration may look at this clip and focus on the aggression rather than the substance. The chairman's closing reminder was a signal that even people who broadly share Representative Carbajal's concerns felt the exchange needed to be contextualized. For Secretary Hegseth, this clip presents a more difficult challenge to manage. His supporters will argue that Representative Carbajal was performing for the camera rather than conducting genuine oversight, and that yes or no demands on complex geopolitical questions like Ukrainian support and treaty obligations oversimplify issues that require real nuance and context. That argument has some merit. American foreign policy toward Ukraine and toward the North Atlantic Treaty Organization involves many variables, and reducing those questions to binary responses can leave out important context. But even granting that argument fully, Secretary Hegseth still did not perform well under the pressure he faced. He appeared defensive when confronted with the Signal chat accusations. He appeared evasive when asked about Ukraine. He appeared reluctant to affirm basic treaty commitments that have been bipartisan American foreign policy for decades, and none of those appearances serve a defense secretary well, particularly one who is already facing calls for his resignation from members of both political parties. The way this clip gets framed in the media will depend almost entirely on where a viewer consumes their news. Progressive and mainstream outlets will lead with Representative Carbajal's closing statement and with the visible difficulty of extracting foundational commitments from the Secretary of Defense. Conservative outlets will lead with the tone, will argue that Representative Carbajal was disrespectful and performative, and will use the Fox News line as an example of how congressional Democrats view conservative media and the officials who come from it. Both of those framings are already written before anyone has even watched the clip. And that is the deeper story that this exchange points toward. Congressional oversight hearings in this political environment are not primarily information-gathering exercises anymore. They are theaters of accountability where both sides come prepared to play their roles. Witnesses arrive ready to deflect, redirect, and endure. Members arrive ready to press, frame, and produce moments. And the gap between those two postures rarely produces genuinely new information for the public. What it produces instead are clips. And clips become narratives, and narratives shape how millions of Americans understand what their government is doing and who is doing it competently. Representative Carbajal understood that dynamic completely before he ever sat down in that hearing room. And he executed his strategy with the precision of someone who came prepared not just to ask questions, but to make a record that would outlast the hearing itself. So here's the question we want to leave you with today. When a member of Congress pushes this hard in a hearing, with this level of directness and this level of confrontation, do you believe it serves the American public by cutting through political evasion and forcing accountability? Or do you believe it turns oversight itself into theater and makes it harder for voters to trust that anyone in Washington is operating in good faith? Tell us exactly what you think in the comments below, because that conversation matters. And if you want clear, thorough, and honest analysis of the moments that are genuinely shaping American politics right now, subscribe and hit the notification bell, because this is exactly what we do here every single week.